Good morning, everyone. Warm welcome to all of you to this AIOS virtual conference. And we are doing a very interesting session today by the name of Game of Thrones. So, this is season 3 of Game of Thrones. This is the third time we are doing it in AIOC. And we have been doing this in other various international, national, and state platforms. The theme for the session this time is young ophthalmologists because we've realized there's a lot of talent in young ophthalmologists. So the whole session is going to be a video-based session. So we got about 35 entries for this session, and our panelists, Dr. Sanjay and Dr. Mohita, have put a lot of time to select the top 10 videos for the session, and we'll be playing each video one by one in the reverse order. And the top three videos, the top three contestants would be declared as king, prince, and knight. So, without further ado, let's start the session. And I'll just share my screen and play the promo video.
It's coming interrupted. Can you start it again?
Sorry, come again.
Dr. Rahil, can you start it again? It didn't come up as it should have. And we couldn't hear any sound to it.
You can hear any sound. Just say again.
If it doesn't come up, I have a copy of that in case you want me to play it.
Give me 1 second.
So first you open your video and pause it and then share.
So, could we all see the promo? Is the sound and video coming to you all?
No.
No. Wait, I'll just do it again.
सर पहले आप वीडियो ओपन करके पॉज कर लीजिए, देन उसके बाद आप उसको स्क्रीन शेयर करें तभी आएगा.
Can you hear me, Dr. Rahil? Do you want me to start it in case of a problem?
Just doing it one more time, otherwise I think.
Yeah. Hi, Amitoj. How are you?
Hello, sir.
Hi.
So could you all see the video and hear the sound?
Yes, it was very nice, Dr. Rahil.
Okay, wonderful. Because I'm constantly being logged out of my screen share. Ekta, can you just see if everything is okay on my end?
Sir, everything looks fine. In fact, we could hear and watch both your videos, so it went well.
Hello, wonderful. We'll just proceed with the session. So before we start, I would like Dr. Mohita to just speak a few words. Can we just understand the whole theme of the concept?
So hello everybody and welcome. This is a very, very interesting program about to start. And as you all know, it's a very popular program. It started about 3 years back, but it's gained a lot of popularity and many people actually wait for it. So this time, there was a slight change in the program where it was thought that let young ophthalmologists be presenting in the form of videos, because there is a lot of young talent there. We all know about it, and we all are looking forward to see all those videos. And though this is a war, it's a friendly war. There is no fighting amongst each other. And let's see in this war who's the best person who wins. Though all the videos are very, very nice and everybody is a winner. But yes, there has to be one winner in any war. And hence we'll announce that one winner in the end. So we'll go in the reverse order. And but as I said, all of them are really, really, really good videos. So we'll get started now, Dr. Rahil.
I'll start with the first video.
So we call Dr. Amitoj Singh. Dr. Amitoj Singh is from Akal Eye Hospital, Jalandhar. Welcome, Dr. Amitoj. You had a wonderful video. We'll just play this video and then we can ask you some questions on it, right?
Yes.
So just confirming, can everybody see my shared screen?
Yeah,
Yes.
play a video. We can see the video. Yes.
Okay.
Hello everyone, today we have a situation intra PCR in a brown cataract. So we can see that winter is here. This is a nightmare situation for most of the anterior segment surgeons. We can see the lens matter brought up in the AC to prevent it from falling in behind into the vitreous cavity. Now we will be introducing foldable intraocular lens. Incision has been made, intraocular lens is being inserted. Now this lens will act as a barrier, as a scaffold, and prevent the lens matter from falling behind, as well preventing the vitreous from coming into the AC. So this lens is will be acting as a great wall. Maneuvers are being done to bring the lens matter in front of the IOL. All through the surgery, liberal use of viscoelastics has been done. Now, low parameter phaco to remove the lens matter. Few more maneuvers to remove last of the lens matter. Almost done. Now we can see the IOL in front of iris. Now the IOL is being dialed under the iris into the ciliary sulcus. Almost done. At this stage we can see a round pupil, IOL in sulcus, and remnant cortical matter. Now the caliper is being used to mark pars plana, and this is a special thing. Vitrectomy is done through pars plana and irrigation is through AC, and retractor here is acting more of like a dragon to finish off any white walkers. So now we are beyond the wall, removing all the lens matter that have gone beyond the wall, finishing off. Now plano-concave lens is being used. Look for any remnant lens matters, aka white walkers. And this is more of a domain of VR surgeon. Cortical cleanup is complete. Now the IOL is being readjusted, bringing it into the center. we can see the beautiful rexes. So now we will inject tricot to look for any vitreous tags. Still we can see around pupil. So limited anterior vitrectomy will be done. So this is more of a Jon Snow thing, removing the last of the notorious things. So hydration of ports. So round pupil and stitchless opposed ports. Air is being introduced. Game is finished. Ocular kingdom is saved. And peace has been restored. Thank you so much. Valar Morghulis.
Dr. Mohita.
Yeah, very nice video.
Thank you, Dr. Amitoj. That was
Yeah. Dr. Amitoj, that was a very nice video. One thing that I wanted to ask, probably I missed it out on the video. What was the viscoelastic that you had used?
Ma'am, initially it was CMC, and after that it was Celon.
Okay. You did use Elon so that so that you have a better this thing in the chamber. So this is a very interesting concept that you have showed, where the lens where the nucleus itself is the scaffold, as well as preventing vitreous from coming up. One thing again that I want to comment is that you did a 3-port vitrectomy after that, because you were also checking the for any remnants. Did you? You were also.
We only made 1 port.
You made only 1 port. Okay. So 1 port for
and the AC. Yes, and we were using the anterior chamber port for irrigation for AC maintainer, and I used the plano concave lens to see the vitreous and the retina, and from the same port we introduced the light also. So 1 port. Yeah.
Okay. So because this is this something what anterior segment surgeon can also do, because everybody is scared of the retina. So probably this is something which even an anterior segment can go ahead with.
My boss, Dr. Balbir Singh Bora, he has been doing this a lot, and so that is what I have learned from him actually.
So that's a great learning from the video, that even anterior segment can surgeon can look into the posterior segment by doing this. And so I think that's one thing that we all learned from this video, and that was very useful for everybody. And here I also remember one technique for children that some people do, which is called epilenticular IOL, where they first put the IOL over the lens and then go from the pars plana route and do a vitrectomy as well as a lensectomy, where IOL acts as a scaffold, so that the posterior axis is also the whole visual axis is clear, and there are no chances of PCO. So this looked like similar to this. So wonderful idea. And
Dr. Mohita, what I also observed, and what I liked was that in a normal IOL scaffold, it is scaffolding the nucleus and the epinucleus.
Yes.
But then normally people put the lens in the sulcus, and then the access to the cortex is not there from the front side.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So here he has shown us a way where you can access the cortex and not leave the cortex behind. So that was a wonderful concept, because there was no other way to access the cortex.
Exactly. And that's what I was wondering, how will he remove the cortex? And then he did it this way, though it was a brown cataract. So so there may not have been much cortex left behind, but yes, it's a good cleanup by going from the posterior route and doing it.
Yeah. Wonderful, Dr. Amitoj. It was a lovely video, and congratulations for being in the finalists of the Game of Thunder Thrones. Can we move on to the next contestant?
So congratulations, Dr. Amitoj. It was a wonderful video. Our next contestant is Dr. Abbas Zaidi. He's from Subharti Medical College, Meerut. And the topic of he's presenting on ring fighters, where he's comparing Malaguin ring with the B-Hex ring. So I'll just show you his video.
Welcome to the Ring Fighters. The video here demonstrates the comparison between B-Hex ring and Malignant ring. So let's begin to find out which will be the king of the rings. This here is of a routine small pupil. First, Malignant ring insertion is shown, in which, as you can see, engage the iris distal to the main wound and then engage the iris with the scrolls on left and right. Retract the plunge and use insertion hook to position final scroll. Now B-Hex ring insertion is shown. Introduce the ring using 23 gauge forceps. Hold the opposite flange with holes and maneuver beneath the iris, ensuring the two notches engage the pupillary border. Repeat the same with the alternating flanges, 3 flanges above and 3 below the iris, alternatingly engaging the pupillary border, giving a hexagon pupil. Round 1 results in routine small pupils. Both rings fare well. B-Hex scores over Malignant B economical. Case of small fibrosed pupil. Here you can see Malignant ring can be inserted beneath the iris easily, and also the scroll towards the main port stretches the iris more effectively due to its rigidity. On the other hand, we are inserting B-Hex ring in a small fibrosed pupil. But you can observe we are struggling to insert the flange ring in fibrosed pupil because of its fragile nature. Round 2 results in small fibrosed pupil. Malignant ring is better as it is rigid and collapsible and can anchor itself to force upon a fibrosed pupil. Round 3 is a case of mid-dilated pupil and hard cataract. In the third scenario, we require a pupil size of 6.5 mm to operate the cataract, which can only be achieved using a Malignant ring because of its larger diameter than B-Hex ring. Round 3 results. In hard cataracts, a large pupil size of 6.5 mm is required, and it is only possible with Malignant ring. So both Malignant ring and B-Hex ring have their own pros and cons in challenging cataract situations. Therefore, every cataract surgeon needs to be well versed with both the rings, which makes an important part of their surgical armamentarium. Welcome to the Ring Fighters. The video here.
So, beautiful video, an amazing comparison. Do we have Dr. Abbas logged in here? Is Dr. Abbas here?
No, sir, he's not.
Okay. So, should we proceed to the third video then? Okay.
The video was quite self-explanatory, and this comparison was a good comparison. Just to highlight that, yes, it is the most economical, but exactly what Dr. Abbas meant by fibrosed pupil, I could not understand. Dr. Chaudhary, could you?
I think it was a fibrosed small pupil which does not expand even on pressure, even on a stretch. So when it does not expand even on a stretch, then Malignant, which is a harder ring, can stretch it open. Whereas the B-Hex ring, which is a softer ring, finds it difficult to stretch it open.
Okay. So I think he brought about a good comparison. Here I want to also tell all the participants that when you with your video, we would like to hear whether you did the surgery or maybe one of your seniors did the surgery, and who did the video editing also. And if your senior has done it, or you have learned the technique, even if you have done it and you have learned the technique from your senior, you should always acknowledge your seniors, because surgery is really an art, and learning, whoever teaches you needs acknowledgement always. So that's what I wanted to, put it across to you. So I think, Rahil, we can go on to the next video.
Yes. So the next video is by Dr. Swati Agarwal, who's from Kolkata, and she's presenting on intraoperative hard eye. So I'll just play her video.
Dr. Swati, do you have your video ready with you? Dr. Swati? Hello? Dr. Swati, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It'll just take a minute.
Can you log in and show your video?
When the going gets tough, it's
Wait,
only
Rahel,
the
just stop this
tough.
video. Yeah, okay. Fine. Yeah, that's okay. So we can see you now. Carry on.
Yeah, okay, get going. Yes, this video is also about the eyes getting hard during the surgery. The first case shows how to identify intraoperative hard eye and managing it, and the second case is about implementation of the learnings. This patient had glaucoma and a drug history of tamsulosin intake. The incisions were made a little narrow and corneal. I noticed an iris flutter at the time of giving oculin, and then the iris started prolapsing. I thought I was going to land up with a floppy iris, so I injected Viscoat and initiated a Rexis. But the iris went on prolapsing and the AC becoming shallower, the globe becoming firm. Gradually, the eye became so hard that I could no longer inject viscoelastics or reposit the iris back. The cornea became so hazy that I could not see the details. I did not know what I was dealing with. I paused, gathered all my strength, and challenged the tough. Mannitol was infused and sterile IO was done to rule out suprachoroidal hemorrhage or effusion. After an hour, the cornea was slightly clearer, but the eye was still very hard. Pars plana aspiration of the vitreous was done with cutter in full visibility, simultaneously palpating the hardness of the globe with the other hand. Alternatively, a pars plana vitreous tap of 0.3 ml could also have been done. I now had a softer eye and a clearer cornea. Rexis could now be easily completed. Phacoemulsification was done and IOL implanted. The battle was finally won.
I again had a similar case a few months later, but this time there was no iris flutter at the time of infusing fluids, but trypan blue oozed out from under the iris, which I had to wash again. At the time of giving viscoelastics, the eye started becoming hard, the cornea was becoming hazy, and iris prolapsed. I loosened the speculum and asked the patient to breathe in through the mouth. With my previous experience, I now knew that I had too hard, rock hard an eye. I had by now learned my lessons. With much effort, I was able to reposit the iris back. I tapped at the opposite paracentesis wounds to displace the trapped fluids from underneath. but the eye was still too hard. Ultimately, I planned to infuse mannitol and the patient was shifted to ward for an hour for the mannitol to take its full effect. When the IOP slightly lowered and the cornea was slightly clearer on slit lamp examination, I resumed the case. Rhexis was completed and gentle hydrodissection done with tapping of the nucleus. The nucleus was rotated. This time, viscoelastics was given over the iris to prevent the fluids from going underneath. Phacoemulsification was done. Cortex was aspirated with bimanual IA. IOL was implanted. Cornea was now much clearer. So finally, I could say that though these eyes had given me a hard time intraoperatively, the challenge was won. And even the throne needs to play it safe. When the going
So excellent video, Dr. Swati. Mohita ma'am. Ma'am, you have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
So that was a challenging situation, definitely, Dr. Swati, which almost all of us come across sometime or the other. And where there is in your case, there was a glaucoma, also there was a tamsulosin history. Sometimes it's a shallow anterior chamber which compounds the situation. Now, as you had shown, it's best to wait for some time, infuse mannitol, as well as do a vitreous tap. A vitreous tap also, in fact, a vitreous tap gives us almost instant results. As soon as we tap the vitreous, we many times find that the eye became soft. But I think it's a better idea to wait, which I find that this video is highlighting, that wait and give mannitol also, so that we are absolutely sure. And here, like you waited for about an hour, shifted the patient to the ward. Another thing that can be done is that abort the surgery on that day. And in fact, there are instances where I've seen that we've done the Rhexis also, and then we've aborted the surgery and then done it after 1 or 2 days, so that, we are sure, and then we find that the eye is absolutely nice and soft and chamber is there, so that we are able to deal with it. Otherwise, it's a struggle. So I think that's a good way of dealing it. And the best thing is to stop the surgery at that time and start with mannitol as well as the tap. Some people do not recommend a tap, but I think I've also seen from my experience that tapping always gives very good results if it's done in a proper manner.
Yes, ma'am. In the first case, even after giving mannitol, when the IOP did not come down and I was still hard, we went for the tap. But in the second case, after giving mannitol, when the chamber was slightly softer, then we could proceed with the surgery. But then again, we gave viscoelastics over the iris.
Yes.
As a preventive measure, so that further hardening does not happen because of the fluid going underneath into the vitreous.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Chaudhary, would you like to comment?
Yeah, see, somehow the anterior segment surgeons are always afraid of going into the posterior segment. And then we were taught the way you said that mannitol and then the process of softening the eye and going about it. However, all through our years, we have learned in our institutions that our seniors used to just tap it in and take out the vitreous and immediately continue with the surgery, and they were successful. But then there was a lot of controversy over whether you should tap raw vitreous and probably pull one of those vitreous strands and disturb the retina. So then came the concept that why not put a trocar cannula and do a vitrectomy and a tap that will reduce or eliminate the stress on the retina. So, but for that, you have to have some accomplishment of having some experience with the retina procedure and a trocar, which most of the anterior segment surgeons do not have. But now it's a question between an immediate tap for those who don't have a trocar or a trocar tap who are slightly used to going in the vitreous that way. But both techniques are emergency surgeries and they should be done in case you are not planning to wait.
Right. And do you suggest that waiting for 2-3 days? What is in your opinion, Dr. Chaudhary?
If you haven't done a Rexis, I think you should wait. If you've done a Rexis, then continue and finish.
Better to not do on the same day because the whole dynamics are altered. So if you do it after 2-3 days, we have seen that it's like a normal eye now on any other day, right?
So in the first case, since we had done our Rexis, and even after mannitol, when the IOP did not go down, then we did that tap with a trocar cannula.
Yeah. Wonderful, Swati. It was a lovely video, very well explained. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
And congratulations for being in the top 10.
Thank you, sir.
I request the judges to stay in the time since we've run out of time and won't be able to watch all the videos at the end.
Okay. So I'll just share the screen and play the next video. So then we have Dr. Nishtha.
The video is lagging. Can we just play the video again with optimization?
Sir, no voice is coming with this video.
Small fibrous pupil, and you can see annulus of fibrous band all along the pupillary edge. I'm trying to separate the fibrous band from the crystalline lens. And you will notice that the posterior synegy are limited just to the pupillary edge and not extending beyond it. Now I am inserting a Malugin ring to open up the pupil, but because of the small rigid pupil, even the Malugin ring buckles, bends and distorts, but refuses to come into position. So I decide to abort the step at the moment and focus on removing the fibrous band first. Using a simple Rexis forceps, I am trying to tear off the fibrous band. But at times, the adhesions are very strong, as you can see in this case. Due to these adhesions, there is a risk that too much traction may tear iris from its root, causing iridodialysis. So we are using a bimanual technique of pull and counter pull and getting this fibrous band pulled away from the pupillary edge. Continuing this process from the other part of the pupil, using the same technique, you can see this fibrous tissue gets separated and comes out from the side port. Putting in visco to see how the pupil looks. Looks good, little more dilated than before. So going after the last piece now, using the same technique of bimanual pull and counter pull, and the fibrous tissue is out. So now let's see how the Malugin ring flares. First loop in position, second loop in position, using the manipulator, third loop in position, followed by the fourth. Now we have a well dilated pupil of 5.5 mm. Phacoemulsification done, and now I am in the process of removing the Malugin ring. This is the technique advised. You push the distal part, engage the proximal part in the hook, and bring out the ring like this. Intraocular lens in position, neatly done surgery, a difficult situation comfortably solved. Thank you.
So that was very well managed, Dr. Nishtha. And just a previous video had shown us that Malugin ring would work good in such pupils. And you showed a condition where even a Malugin ring was not working initially, but you had to remove the fibrous band. In these cases, what is expected in post-op period is some reaction, and maybe so what was the amount of reaction you had next day?
Ma'am, the patient had reaction of grade 2. There was cells and flare in the AC, but the IOL was clear and well centered. So we gave him post-op steroids, and the patient was fine on day 7.
And sometimes we also expect that while you were removing that band, there can be some bleeding. So is this one case that you did, or there have been more number of cases? Any case where there was a bleeding intraoperatively from the iris?
Yes, ma'am, there were cases. There were intraoperative bleeding, but can be managed with intraoperative ADR.
Okay, thank you. Well managed. Dr. Chaudhary, would you like to comment?
Yeah, so far, when we were doing all these cases, the Malugin ring used to work very well and stretch open. But probably in this case, it looked that when she was putting in the Malugin ring, even the Malugin ring was buckling. Right. So that shows the amount of fibrosis in the pupillary area and total posterior synechia. And I think the way she moved the probe all around, it appeared that the posterior synechia were only confined to the pupillary area, probably a millimeter beyond it. Yes. And beyond that, it seemed that the iris was all clear from the lens. But yes, a very well managed thing for a small pupil with so much of fibrosis.
So well done. And we move on to the next video, Rahil.
So the next video is by Dr. Ankush Mahajan, and he's from Mahajan Eye Hospital, Jalandhar. And he's showing us a video on multi-chop technique. I'll just share my screen and start with the video.
Multi-chop, modified horizontal chop for nucleus disassembly. During horizontal chopping, for creating multiple pieces of the nucleus, the phaco tip has to be buried in the nucleus substance again and again every time the chopper is placed opposite to the phaco tip to complete the chop. This uses energy. We describe here a slight modification of the horizontal chopping technique, wherein after the primary chop, the phaco tip has to be buried only once in the heminucleus in order to complete multiple chopping of that heminucleus. After the primary chop, the phaco tip is embedded into a heminucleus at the junction of its central and peripheral 1/3, and then the chopper is placed into the periphery at the other extreme end of the heminucleus. The chopper is moved towards the nucleus center and simultaneously laterally away from phaco tip, thereby creating one fragment. Without removing the phaco tip from its embedded position, the chopper is again used in a similar fashion to create more fragments, moving from one end of the heminucleus to the other end. Before chopping the part of the nucleus held by the phaco tip, the chopper is crossed across the tip to chop the peripheral part, and then the last chop is made at the fragment held by the phaco tip. The chopped half is rotated, and then the other heminucleus is also chopped in a similar fashion to get at least 6 to 8 fragments. The primary chop is done using the horizontal chopping technique, wherein the phaco tip is buried in the center of the nucleus, chopper is placed opposite to it, both are brought together, and two heminuclei are created. The division of the heminucleus is done using the multi-chopping technique, wherein the phaco tip is buried in the junction of the central and peripheral 1/3 of one heminucleus. The chopper is used to create multiple nuclear pieces. Here we are able to create 5 pieces. Now you can either remove the pieces immediately or create multiple pieces of the other heminucleus and then remove them entirely. So the heminucleus is now rotated again. Phaco tip is buried at the junction of the central and peripheral 1/3. Again the chopper is used in a similar fashion to create 5 more fragments. So here, just by burying the phaco tip in the substance of the nucleus just twice, we are able to create 10 fragments and save a lot of phaco energy that would have been expended in the nucleus had the conventional technique been used. This is another case wherein the similar technique is used. First, the primary chop is made using the conventional horizontal chopping, and then the two heminuclei are divided into multiple fragments using the multi-chopping technique. The video has been sped up for the sake of saving time. You need a vacuum of 450 or more and a flow rate of 45 or beyond in order to keep the pieces fixed securely at the phaco tip, otherwise there can be a movement of the heminuclei during chopping. In another case, the primary chop is used to divide the nucleus into two heminuclei, then multi-chop is used to divide this heminucleus into multiple fragments using the principles which have been outlined before. To summarize, even if you don't have a femtocataract machine to pre-chop the nucleus, you can still bring down your phaco energy level usage to similar levels by using the multi-chop technique. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, this multi-chop technique is useful, and this is something by which any phaco surgeon learns by default. You know, initially they go through the book teaching and they start doing their chopping in the way it is described. But by default, every phaco surgeon most phaco surgeons will learn this technique where they will hold it once and then chop it multiple times. And I think by showing this video, what people learn over years, you have made it simplified for them to learn it in the beginning itself. So I think that's the great value of this video, that years of experience can be cut down by just seeing this video. And but the very important thing is that it has to be a hard cataract, and a pretty hard cataract, and the hold has to be very, very good. Your comments, Dr. Chaudhary?
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to my mind is that multi-chop is saving on your time. So you're becoming a faster surgeon. So initially a beginner should not be going after it. But when it comes that you want to do a faster surgery, you have quite a few on your list, and you want to do a safe surgery, multi-chop sounds very interesting. But of course, then you should have a good grip, like Dr. Mohita said, that a good grip is useful. So you need to do it only in where you can get a good grip, that is grade 3 upwards. A very soft cataract, you may not be able to execute a multi-chop, and you don't really need to do that because the cataract is so soft, it will come out very fast in any case. A very good presentation, point very clearly taken. And congratulations for being in the finalists. Are you here?
Dr. Ankush was logged in, but somehow he logged out, and I've just sent him the link again. So I think he's going to take some time to log back in. So in the meanwhile, I'll start with the next video. So next video is by Dr. Asif, and Dr. Asif is from RP Center AIMS, and his video is on fixation of the subluxation. So I'll just share my screen and play the video.
Lens coloboma appears similar to a subluxated lens as seen in Marfan syndrome. However, you differentiate by the non-rounded edge or flattened equator of the lens and absent zonules. Management of both are essentially same. In our patient, to start with, we place two diametrically opposite marks using Agarwal glued IOL marker at the point of maximum separation of the lens equator from the limbus. A Hoffman's pocket is then created on the side of the subluxation. The anterior chamber is filled with viscoelastic. A capsulotomy is made with the help of a needle cystitome and forceps, ensuring as central and as large as possible. In this scenario, forceps helps in better grasp and control, especially in the subluxated area, to prevent runoff of the rhexis. Care to be taken to ensure continuous and circular rhexis as the CTR and segments are planned subsequently. A gentle hydrodissection is being done, and you can see the separated soft nuclear material. Anterior chamber maintainer attached to a bottle height of 30 cm maintains the minimum intraocular pressure and prevents chamber collapse during instrumentation in and out of the eye in the absence of viscoelastic. The cortex and the soft nucleus is being aspirated in irrigation and aspiration mode without using any phaco energy. The bag is then formed using viscoelastic and the CTR is being placed inside the bag. Placement of the CTR stretches the bag and thereby bringing the bag and the rhexis more towards the center. Two capsular hooks hold the bag and keep it anchored as well as pull the bag towards the center while the cortex is being removed by the bimanual irrigation and aspiration system. A small level of difficulty is being encountered in pulling out the cortex entangled in the CTR ring. The capsular hooks are removed and the next step of securing the Ahmed segment is being initiated. The two ends of the 9-oprolin sutures are guided through the Hoffman's pocket sclera and the conjunctiva. This is followed by the suture loop in the anterior chamber being exteriorized through the main incision. Once exteriorized, the loop is cut and the cut ends are passed through the eyelet of the Ahmed segment and the ends are tied. Pulling the suture ends guides the segment into the bag and the suture ends are then pulled out through the Hoffman's pocket. These ends are tied gently and tightened so as to center the bag without stretching the opposite zonules. Care to be taken not to over tighten these knots. suture knot retracts into the pouch. The pouch need not be secured with suture. After IOL insertion, we could see a well-centered IOL in the bag.
So that was a very nice video, very clear video. The quality of video was very, very good. And you have highlighted the steps also very well. So I think the video was self-explanatory and I don't feel I need to add any more comment to it. Dr. Chaudhary, if you would like to add something.
I think you echoed my sentiments that it was a very clean surgery, very well highlighted surgery. All steps came out very well. So what is normally a very difficult situation, it seemed that he handled it very well. My only difference would have been that I saw him first taking out the nucleus and then putting in the CTR. I would have first, after the rexes and a little hydro, I would have first put in a CTR to stretch the bag.
Right.
That would have brought the lens a little in the center and it would have stretched the posterior capsule and made my subsequent steps more simpler.
Agree with you. Yeah, so he's there.
Dr. Asif? Hello?
He's not there.
Doctor, currently he's not logged in.
Okay, right. So can you move on to the next person? And I think if somebody can show his own videos, that would be a great idea because that way we'll see that person on screen. If you can.
Yeah, so we can do that. So the next presenter is Dr. Sarika Jindal. She's from I7 and she's showing us a video on Rex's flap technique for wide target cataracts. So can I just request Dr. Sarika ma'am to share her screen and show us the video?
So Dr. Sarika, can you hear us? Hello?
Dr. Sarika is muted. Ma'am, you have to unmute yourself first.
In case you don't have your video ready, should we play it for you?
Yes, I think you need to play the video. Since Dr. Rahil has all the video, he needs to play it. I don't have the video.
I'll play Dr. Sarika's video.
The biggest concern in a wide turgid cataract is that the rexes can run out, causing Argentinian flag sign. Many techniques have been developed to reduce the chances of Argentinian flag sign. The current most popular technique is to give a puncture in the center of the capsular bag and let the cortical fluid escape. This causes a little decompression of the capsular bag, and then a small 3 mm rexus can be made. Once this rexus is complete, half the battle is won. Now, do hydrodissection, keeping the nucleus pressed so that the fluid does not collect behind the nucleus, as retronuclear pressure would rupture the posterior capsule. Dialing the nucleus, it becomes easier to decompress the bag, and once the bag is decompressed, you can comfortably give a small nick in the rexus, enlarge the rexus with your forceps. This technique has really reduced the incidence of wide cataract rexus from running out. However, there would be still certain situations where this technique may not work. Like this situation here, the moment you made the puncture, you had Argentinian flag sign. Then it was postulated that in a turgid white cataract, the maximum pressure on the capsule is in the center of the cataract. You enter the capsule from the mid-periphery with a 26 gauge needle bevel up and then suck a little bit of fluid cortex to decompress the bag, then it is safer to make a small rhexis. However, the risk of keeping the bevel up was that the tip of the needle could touch the anterior capsule and cause the puncture. So, the next step was to keep the bevel down and keep the nucleus pressed. Do a little bit of suction and decompress the bag, and do what is called a flap rhexis technique. In this flap rhexis technique, you have control over both the edges of the tear, and once you cross the mid-center about a millimeter, you take control over one edge of the rhexis and turn it around to create a small rhexis. The next consideration was for how long to decompress the bag. It is important to note that decompression should be for very short duration, that is just a little decompression, because if you decompress the bag, as you are seeing it now, the liquid cortex, which acts as a buffer between the needle and the anterior capsule, reduces, and there is a risk that the needle may hit the anterior capsule and cause tear, which has happened in this case. However, since the capsular bag had been decompressed, it was not much of a concern, as you can still do a safe rhexis encircling the capsular tear. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Sarika, very, very nice video. And it talks a lot about the controls over the rhexis. And that's something which we all need to learn. Once we learn a rhexis, we feel that we have learned the rhexis, but these are the challenging cases. And what you've highlighted is very nice, that it's the mid-periphery which is the most important area here. So we have to make changes accordingly, because it's the mid-periphery where your controls would be better. So in your first video also, you went on first to making it as a very, very small rhexis, and then you enlarged it because you remained in the center in that area. So so I think your video has demonstrated a lot of good things, and I really appreciate the learning that you have given to everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Monty.
Yeah. So any comments, Dr. Chaudhary, on this?
Yeah, this technique of flap rhexis, this we have started using in rather we just happened to see it do it, and we all thought in I7 that this is a good technique, because when you do a needle puncture, then there is a little edge of tear going up and down, and because of the retrolenticular pressure, it could move in either direction. So you're controlling one and the other could move out. So the idea was to bring both the edges in your control at the same time. And so hold the flap in the center and hold the rhexis in the center and tear it like a flap. Both the edges are tearing at the same time and coming towards the center, So that secures both the edges. And you have a more wider exposure area in the center. So you can turn the nucleus around, do the debulking and all that. It's working well. And all of our consultants are doing this. I think probably with more experience, we'll be able to publish something on this.
Once when you start, Dr. Sarika, and lift up this flap, controlling both the sides of the flap, where is it that you stop?
We stop, we go beyond a little, we go a little millimeter beyond the center, and then we take control over the one margin.
One margin. So it is the center, which is where, which is the most turgid. So you have avoided that. You have reached a little beyond the center, and then so that the control would be good after that. So
yeah, in this technique, the main advantage is that we have control over both the edges.
Yeah.
Suppose if we are doing it from one side, the other side can run out. But in this case, since it is already decompressed and we are holding both the edges, it doesn't run out on either way.
Good. I think everybody should try this. This is a very novel technique. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And next.
So, we proceed to the next video, and we are now in the top 3 videos. So the second runners-up is Dr. Abhinav Dhami, and he's from Dhami Eye Center, Ludhiana, and his video is on phaco in corneal opacity. So share the screen.
That's our night coming up.
Dr. Dhami, yeah, hi, how are you? Can you play your own video? Dr. Ryan?
No, sir, can you play the video?
Yeah, just playing the video, sir.
Okay.
Corneal opacification is a major cause of blindness in the developing and the developed countries. It is associated with age-related cataracts and contributes to poor visual acuity. Suboptimal visualization of the lenticular morphology can render intraoperative difficulty. The decision for surgery will include either by planning phacoemulsification alone or in combination with a corneal transplant.
Now. Dr. Abhinav, you can switch on your camera.
Yes, sir. Corneal opacification is a major cause of blindness in the developing and the developed countries. It is associated with age-related cataracts and contributes to poor visual acuity. Suboptimal visualization of the lenticular morphology can render intraoperative difficulty. The decision for surgery will include either by planning phacoemulsification alone or in combination with a corneal transplant. The various decision-making factors include evaluation of grade and extent of corneal opacity or haze, expertise of surgeon SICS, ACCA, phaco and transplant, donor availability, visual requirement of the patient, risk versus benefit, patient's choice. What all things we need to assess for planning combined surgery. The choice of surgery will depend upon the location of opacity. The surgical technique and site of incision will vary with the location of the corneal opacity. An inferior opacity can be managed by a temporal sitting approach, while in case a central opacity is peripheral, we can take a superior approach for incisions making. The IOL power calculation can be managed by optical biometry is mostly impossible. Axial length can be measured with ultrasonic methods. Other eye keratometry can be used for IOL power approximation. IOL type preferred would be monofocal. The various intraoperative maneuvers for best possible outcomes. Microscope with good retroillumination. Trepan glue to stain anterior capsule. Dispersive viscoelastic agents. Nylon hooks if pupil is non-dilating. Endoilluminator chandeliers. In this video, we show the use of retroillumination and how it enables us in performing a good capsular hexis. After hydrodissection, the retroillumination view does become hindered, so the trick here is to do a phaco salute by prolapsing the nucleus in the anterior chamber, thus enabling easier emulsification and prevents posterior capsular rent. In the case, we have a superior corneal opacity, and by choosing a temporal site for incision and as we shift to retroillumination, the view becomes much clearer and enables trouble-free phaco emulsification. This is a case of healed viral keratitis, wherein the patient refused for a combined surgery. Here, we make use of a 23-gauge assisted chandelier light retroillumination by fixing it inferiorly 3.5 mm from limbus. We can see a great 3D-like view which enables us to perform capsulorhexis and gives us a perfect delineation of hydrodissection. Phacoemulsification in such cases initially is a little cumbersome, but provided with such a view is definitely worth the effort. In conclusion, case selection is extremely important, with a well-explained visual prognosis to the patient. A good microscope with retroillumination eases out intraoperative surgical manipulation. In the end, the surgical technique should be the one that's most comfortable to the surgeon.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Dhami. Very nice video. So the video, first and foremost, my comment is that the video built up the whole atmosphere for the Game of Thrones. So one thing that is important for any video is presentation, how you present it and what you are presenting for. That is what I want to tell all others also. So Dr. Abhinav, no, your name?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Abhinav
ma'am.
Dhami has actually got the whole concept into this video. And secondly, yes, the retroillumination by chandelier is a known technique now. And again, you have demonstrated it very well, and it shows that how, it's unbelievable how clearly everything starts becoming visible as soon as you
Yes,
put
ma'am.
the, retroillumination.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
that's it. Dr. Sanjay Chaudhary, please.
Yeah, in fact, he has given us all the options very clearly. He's highlighted the fact that it has to be retroillumination for lesser corneal opacities, so you can see things better, and then a chandelier for situations which are even worse. So it's a complete video which is handling corneal opacity. So it's really wonderful.
Thank you, sir.
I think congratulations for being in the top 3.
Thank you, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
And Dr. Rahul, we proceed further.
Next, Dhami boss, that was a wonderful video. Wonderful.
Thank
So
you, Dhami.
next is Dr. Tushya, and he's from Om Prakash Eye Hospital, Amritsar. And his video is on zonulopathy. So I'll just play the video.
Ready with your video, Tushar? Can you play your own? Or should we play it for you?
Yes, sir, if you can play.
There are no financial disclosures in the subject matter of the film. This video is a stepwise approach towards different case scenarios of generalized zonulopathy and their management. A long tunnel of the primary incision is preferred to avoid anterior chamber fluctuations, which can in turn cause stress to the zonules. Additionally, long tunnel side port incision using a 25 gauge needle calibrated to the shape and size of the instruments further helps in anterior chamber stability. Triamcinolone acetate is used to ascertain the presence of vitreous in the anterior chamber. Intracameral epinephrine is used to dilate the pupil. Sometimes a highly retentive ophthalmic viscosurgical devices can also help in dilating the pupil and keeping the chamber stable. However, a non-dilating pupil should require the use of a pupil dilating aid like a Malugan ring in this case. Invariably, the lens moves because of decreased countertraction by zonules. A sharp cystitome can be used to create the initial nick. A halo sign too indicates zonulopathy, which requires the use of cystitome. Other methods to initiate include double pinch method by 2 needles, use of radiofrequency tip, applying femtosecond laser assisted capsulorhexis, employment of fugoblade, and the use of septorhexis procedure. Sizing of rhexis is important. A large rhexis should be planned as the compromised centrifugal force exerted by weak zonules can predispose to capsular contraction syndrome and IOL capsular bag complex subluxation or dislocation later on. Large rhexis also helps to bring the nucleus out of the capsular bag, thereby decreasing risk of zonular stress. Bimanual rhexis can be done too in zonulopathy to complete the rhexis. Here, the second forceps provides countertraction. Capsular hooks can be used as artificial zonules to immobilize the bag and help complete the rhexis by providing counter-traction. Multiple quadrants hydrodissection helps to loosen the corticocapsular adhesions. Rotation can be tried by bimanual method. It can also be tried using capsular supporting aids. Capsular hooks are preferred because they function as artificial zonules by providing anterior-posterior capsular support right up to the equator, unlike the iris hooks which provide only vertical capsular support. Low fluid parameters and low IOP should be used to provide stable anterior chamber settings and prevent sudden deepening or collapse of anterior chamber. The method of choice for nuclear emulsification is chopping. Slow motion phacoemulsification is preferred. Rotation of nucleus should be attempted only when capsular hooks have supported the bag. Forceful rotation should not be attempted. Nuclear pieces are chopped, totally separated and left in situ to provide scaffolding, thereby decreasing the tendency for the bag to collapse. These voluminous hard nuclear fragments help in providing three-dimensional support to the capsular bag. The nuclear fragments should be brought out of the bag into the center and emulsified to decrease stress on zonules. The capsular hooks provide advantage of delaying the insertion of CTR. CTR should be inserted before removing capsular hooks to prevent stress on zonules. In cases with minimal zonulopathy, as in Morgagnian cataracts with hard nuclear fragments where high fluidics are used, there can be a PCR or bag emulsification post-occlusion. Here, the last nuclear fragment is brought out of the bag into the interior chamber and then IOL is implanted in the bag. At this stage, IOL acts as a scaffold and protects the posterior capsule and the bag. A stable anterior chamber is maintained to decrease stress on zonules at the end of the emulsification by keeping the bag inflated with OVD. Otherwise, there can be stress to the zonules and zonular dehiscence with sudden collapse of the anterior chamber. Despite viscoseparation of cortical lamellars, tangential stripping of cortical lamellars is done for cortex removal. With difficult cortical removal, reverse stripping can be done as well for cortex removal. Anterior capsular polishing is done to decrease late onset capsular contraction syndrome and late IOL back complex dislocation. It helps by decreasing the progressive centripetal force exerted by fibrotic capsular rim, thereby reducing zonular stress. At times, radial stria in the posterior capsule indicate weakness of zonules. The insertion of CTR can be done manually or with the injector. In the manual method, CTR should be directed towards the bag. The bag has to be adequately inflated and not overinflated. Once the leading eyelet is in the bag, the dialing is continued till more than half is in the bag. Before implanting the proximal eyelet, it is confirmed that the bag is still adequately inflated. With continued dialing of the CTR, 3/4 of CTR is placed in the bag. At that stage, the proximal eyelet is held at the tip outside the primary incision and advanced in the bag by 3 o'clock hours away from the primary incision. CTR provides centrifugal horizontal force, making the flaccid capsular bag taut and allowing the stria to disappear. CTR can also be implanted through an injector slowly into the bag until the trailing eyelet becomes visible. With the support of Sinskey hook, in the bag implantation of CTR is ensured. Additionally, CTS can be used to fixate the bag to the sclera to prevent late IOL bag dislocation in progressive zonulopathy. Multi-piece IOL can be implanted in mild zonulopathy to provide better centrifugal support to the bag.
So very nice, Tushya. You have elaborated on almost everything that could be related to zonulopathy. And there were a few points, small tips which were very, very useful. Things like slow surgery. That is one thing which everybody has to remember. You cannot be fast here. Things like do not allow the chamber to collapse. Bimanual rotation is another thing that you highlighted, which many do not know about whenever there is such a situation. And the role of capsular hooks definitely rather than iris hooks. So what I feel is you have taken out all the aspects and put it in one video, and which was a very difficult proposition, I think, to put them all in one video. So very well done.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Dr. Chaudhary, if you would like to say anything.
Yeah, in fact, Tusha covers everything. But what is more important to highlight is that zonulopathies are still not given the right due importance as they should be for a cataract surgeon. Many a times, cataract surgeons just continue not realizing that there is a zonulopathy. One of the first indications to realize that there could be a mild zonulopathy is when you're trying to do a rhexis and you make a puncture with a needle. The puncture doesn't come in very easily. There is a dent with the needle, and the puncture is not coming in, right? So you have to push a little more harder than normal to make that puncture. So that is the sure shot sign that somewhere around there is a zonulopathy. And in such situations, even though you are progressing with a good cataract surgery, I think you should put in a CTR. Yes. The second thing is, it's all a question about stretching the bag. The more you stretch the bag, the safer it is to move around. So the moment you've done a rhexis, I would say put in a CTR immediately at that time and then continue with any manipulation that you want to do. But other than that, everything has come in very clearly. Wonderful. Congratulations, Dr. Tusha.
Thank you, sir.
Being the second in the game of ophthalmic zones.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, ma'am.
So moving on to the last video of this session, which is the best video, the King's video. And for that, we have Dr. Anurag Badhani, who will be showing us swing needle capsulotomy. So I'll just share my screen and show you the video.
Dr. Anurag, are you there?
In this film, we aim to demonstrate an efficient new technique, saving needle microcapsulotomy, to avoid Argentinian flag sign during capsular rhexis.
Anurag, if you're there, can you please come on the camera?
The authors have no financial interest in the subject matter of this film. Argentinian flag sign is a well-known complication during capsular rhexis and intumescent white cataracts, which typically arises instantly after the initial puncture of stretched out tense anterior capsule. Till date, it was known that the raised intralentricular pressure along with forward thrust of the nucleus is solely responsible for the extension of the tear to periphery. To counter this, several techniques including the small needle aspiration technique had been described to decompress the bag, but peripheral extension of the tear has still been frequently seen, and this happens instantly after pricking the capsule, even before initiating the aspiration of the liquid cortex. It means there had to be some other factors responsible, which assess the raised intralentricular pressure to propagate the spreading of the capsule after the initial prick. On extensive surgical evaluation, we came to know that in reality, it's not only the raised intralentricular pressure or forward thrust of the nucleus which causes the extension of the tear. It is the configuration of the initial prick made by sharp hypodermic needle on the anterior capsule, which has the potential to spontaneously extend along its open edges. Hypodermic needle or the rhexis forceps, while puncturing the anterior capsule, create a linear cut configuration. Linear cut with discontinuous open edges on the tense and stretched out anterior capsule tends to easily open up and split into a complete capsular tear extending to periphery due to the pressure gradient triggering off a disruptive force. Henceforth, we came up with a hypothesis that if we were able to manually create an opening in the anterior capsule which had a round regular configuration like a capsulotomy in true sense, instead of a linear cut, we may provide resistance against disruptive forces, thus preventing Argentinian flag sign. Round hole microcapsulotomy help liquefied lens matter to egress out and decompress the bag before initiating the capsular access. To prick the capsule, we developed a novel instrument, sieving needle microcapsulotome, with a round pointed tip like a sieving needle system. Sieving needle microcapsulotome, when puncture the anterior capsule, create a round hole opening with smooth margins, unlike the linear cut produced by sharp tipped needles. In most of the cases, single microcapsulotomy is sufficient to decompress the bag, but in some cases, multiple microcapsulotomies are required to evacuate the multiple fluid pockets in the lens. To accomplish successful microcapsulotomy, first of all, we need to stain the anterior capsule with 0.06% of trypan blue. Once the staining is complete, then the anterior chamber is injected with cohesive viscoelastic. Then through the main incision, microcapsulotome is inserted into the anterior chamber and punctures the anterior capsule at the center. The hole created by the microcapsulotome helps to egress the interlenticular fluid out from the capsular bag. This can be completed by the milking technique with the help of the viscocannula. Once the decompression of the capsular bag is complete, then the capsular access can be initiated from the central hole and completed successfully. To conclude, sieving needle microcapsulotomy with circular round hole puncture of the anterior capsule along with pressure decompression is the simplest of technique, which enables us to successfully prevent Argentinian flag sign with very little effort and much easier surgical maneuvers. Sieving needle microcapsulotome, a simple yet highly effective novel tool, is an ideal device to open up the tense anterior capsule to adequately decompress the bag prior to the initiation of the capsular access. Thank you for being with sieving needle microcapsulotomy.
Thank you so much. Very nice video, a great innovation. Innovations is something which is always required. And in any video, the best thing that can come out is if it is an innovation. So this is something which we all should be, we have to go more into that thinking mode and become more innovative. And I feel his concept is similar to what Dr. Sarika had shown, where we are controlling the two edges. So similarly, instead of a linear thing, he's making a kind of a rounded thing so that it is not spreading out. So the concept is that was a large flap and this is a small needle. But it's a great innovation, and innovations are always welcome. And this is what we all have to learn, that we all keep doing things, but yet we do not put our mind to thinking. And if we put our mind to thinking, that can really help improve surgeries for everybody. So Dr. Chaudhary, please.
Yeah, so innovations do not always have to be very complex and require big instruments. Innovations are ideas, and simple ideas work very well and are taken very well. So probably all ophthalmologists can try this technique and see how it helps them. Congratulations, Dr. Badal.
Congratulations.
For being the king of the Game of Thalamic Thrones, AIOS 2021.
Thank you so